Most kids get grounded. I got thrown out. The night air cut through my thin jacket, sharp and unrelenting. I sat on the cold porch steps, clutching my backpack like it was the last thread tying me to life. I was 13, trembling, alone, completely abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect me. With a flat, final voice, like a judge delivering a sentence, my father said, "You're on your own now." My mother didn't even look at me. She pushed the door shut as if I were a stranger, not her child. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. The porch light flickered overhead, shadows twisting across my tear-streaked face. I pressed my hands against my eyes, trying to block out the humiliation, the cold, the hunger, and the brutal truth. I had nowhere to go. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, curious but motionless. Instead of opening their doors, they became silent witnesses to my exile. Hours passed. My stomach growled, teeth chattering against the night wind. Every memory of that house, birthday candles, winter hugs, laughter, stabbed like knives. How could warmth turn to ice so quickly? How could love expire overnight? A siren wailed in the distance. I curled into myself, smaller and smaller, as if sighs could shield me. This can't be the end. My voice cracked, and yet, buried deep inside, a small, fragile spark refused to die. Footsteps echoed down the sidewalk. Slow, uncertain, approaching. My heart jolted, fear, hope, and confusion tangled together. It was Uncle Harold. Quiet, steady, unremarkable to the world, but to me in that moment, a lifeline. He knelt beside me, his coat brushing against mine. Softly, he said, "You're not alone." No accusations, no questions, no pity, just presence. And somehow that simple act cracked open the door to hope. I looked up through blurry eyes, wondering if anyone could truly care after what had just happened. His steady gaze answered the question before I could speak. But I didn't know then, Uncle Harold wasn't just rescuing me from the cold. He was rescuing me from a life that would have destroyed me. And soon, the world would learn just how wrong my parents had been. They didn't just abandon me once. They abandoned me every day after. Harold's house was small, modest, almost forgettable to anyone else. But to me, it was the first place that didn't swallow me whole. There were no cold stares, no slammed doors, no footsteps that made me flinch. Just walls that didn't judge, and a man who didn't ask for explanations. The first night, he showed me a room, a bed, a blanket, simple things that felt almost miraculous. At the dinner table, Harold talked little, and I had mastered silence long before arriving. We ate quietly, we cleaned quietly, we existed quietly. But day by day, warmth found its way into the silence. School became my escape. I buried myself in books, late assignments, test prep, not for attention, but to prove to myself that the world couldn't break me. And yet, shadows lingered. Every kind word from a teacher, every smile from a classmate came with fear. Fear it would disappear. Fear I would lose it. Fear it was temporary. Trust was a luxury I could not afford.
One afternoon, as autumn leaves chased each other across the courtyard, a teacher called out to me, "You've got a bright future. Don't let anyone dim it." I froze mid-step. Hope felt foreign, awkward, almost uncomfortable, but I let it sit for a moment. Maybe someone believed in me. Harold noticed the change. He didn't pry. He never pried. One night over tea, he simply said, "The world can be cruel, but it can also be beautiful." I didn't understand then, but those words planted seeds, quiet seeds of resilience, grit, and something that would later grow into a hunger for justice. Then came the scholarship, a full ride, a prestigious university, a ticket out of the shadows. Not just escape, proof. Proof that my story didn't have to end where it began. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future, a life rewritten on my terms. But even as I celebrated, a quiet, stubborn thought clung to me. What if the past isn't finished with me yet? I didn't know it then, but the people who threw me away were already circling back for what they needed. The past has a cruel habit of knocking when you finally stop waiting for it. I was 19 when the call came. It was late afternoon, sun pouring through the kitchen window, tea still steaming in my cup. The phone rang once, then twice, then a third time. I should have ignored it. My life was moving forward, finally clean of the shadows I grew up in. But I answered. A crisp, unfamiliar voice spoke. "Is this regarding the biological child of Mr. and Mrs. Grant?" Biological. The word hit like a slap. I felt the room tilt. "Yes," I managed, though my voice didn't feel like mine. The man introduced himself, an attorney, professional, polished, detached. Then came the blow. "Your parents wish to contact you regarding a family matter." Parents, a word I hadn't used in years. And just like that, the porch, the cold, the hunger, the abandonment, all came roaring back. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream, but curiosity, dangerous and relentless, dug its claws into me. "What family matter?" I asked through clenched teeth. Silence. Then a pause, so calculated it felt rehearsed. "Inheritance proceedings are underway." My breath caught. Inheritance? After all these years? The attorney continued. "There is a clause, Clause 7, that cannot be executed without your participation." Clause 7. The name alone sounded like something pulled from a courtroom drama. My voice trembled with a mix of confusion and fury. Why now? Another pause, longer this time. "Your parents would prefer to discuss it directly." Parents, inheritance, Clause 7. The words crawled under my skin like poison. I hung up without responding and sat there, staring at the wall, shaking. Finally, I spoke. "They want something from me." Harold nodded once, slow and knowing. It wasn't a reunion they wanted, it was a transaction. And that was the moment I realized something chilling. People rarely come back for you. They come back for what they need. But I had no idea how desperate they had become or how far they would go to get what they wanted. I woke up with swollen eyes and a heart that still felt heavy. I didn't want to get out of bed, but avoiding life wouldn't fix anything. At breakfast, Mom placed a bowl in front of me. She didn't say a word. I didn't either. But the silence between us spoke volumes. I wondered if maybe she cared, just a tiny bit. But before that thought could settle, Dad walked in. He glanced at me, then glanced at the clock. "You're late," he said flatly. "Don't make it a habit." His voice had no anger, no concern, just cold efficiency. I nodded silently, but inside, something burned. I was tired of being treated like a burden in a house that was supposed to be mine, too. Later at school, I tried to pretend everything was normal, but my best friend, Jenna, didn't buy it for a second. "Okay," she said, blocking my locker with her arm. "What's going on?" I forced a laugh. "Family drama, nothing new." She frowned. "You know you can talk to me, right?" I wanted to. I really did. But opening up meant reliving it, and I wasn't ready. So I shrugged it off. And Jenna, respecting my walls, let it go. But just when I thought I could get through the day unnoticed, the universe had other plans. In the hallway, I heard giggling. And then my name. Not in a friendly way. A group of girls stood by the lockers, whispering, pointing, and laughing. I walked past them, pretending I didn't hear, but their voices were sharp enough to cut. "That's her. Her own family doesn't even like her. No wonder she's always alone." My breath caught in my throat. How did they know? Who told them? It wasn't like my family cared enough to gossip about me. But then I remembered. My sister, Mia, with her perfect hair and perfect life, she lived to humiliate me, and I wouldn't put it past her, not for a second. At lunch, I sat alone under the staircase outside. The cold bricks against my back felt more comforting than the people inside. I pulled out my sketchbook, the only place that didn't judge me. My pencil danced across the page, creating worlds that loved me, even when real ones didn't. But what happened next changed everything. Mia walked up with her group of friends, and that smirk, that smug, cruel smirk, told me I was about to pay for something I never even did. And she didn't disappoint. Scene shift outside during lunch. Mia stood over me with her little entourage, their sneakers tapping impatiently on the pavement. "So this is where you hide now," she said, folding her arms. Her voice had that sugary sweetness she used whenever she was about to be cruel. Her friend snickered on cue. I kept drawing. I didn't even look up. Giving her attention was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Mia stepped closer and tried again. "Dad's looking for you," she said. "He said you skipped chores again." I finally raised my eyes. "Funny," I said. "He didn't say a word to me this morning." Her smirk widened. "Oh, he said plenty." My stomach tightened. Dad rarely spoke about me at all. If he did, it was never good. Mia leaned down, her voice low, loud enough for her friends but quiet enough to sting. "He said you're an embarrassment to the family, and honestly, he wasn't wrong." Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit, because deep down, part of me believed them. I closed my sketchbook and stood up. I refused to cry in front of Mia. That was her victory ritual. But she wasn't done. As I slung my backpack over my shoulder, she snatched my sketchbook out of my hands. "Wow," she said, flipping through the pages dramatically. "Look at this. Since when did you become some tortured artist?" Her friends giggled again. My voice shook. "Give it back, Mia." She tilted her head. "Why? It's not like anyone cares about this stuff." Then she tore a page out, a page I spent hours on. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. "Stop!" I yelled, grabbing her wrist. For a moment, just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, not fear, but satisfaction. She wanted a reaction, and she finally got one. One of her friends gasped, "Ooh, she's feisty today." Mia laughed, tossed the ripped page like confetti, and shoved the sketchbook into my chest. "Relax," she said. "It's not like it mattered anyway." Then they walked away talking about weekend plans, as if they hadn't just ripped apart something I cared about. I sat down slowly, gathering the torn pieces from the pavement. They fluttered in the wind like broken feathers. It didn't matter that it was just paper. It mattered that it was mine. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of a storm no one in my family was prepared for. To be continued. I walked home slowly that day, each step heavier than the last. My sketchbook was clutched against my chest like a wounded animal. The house was quiet when I arrived. Not peaceful, just silent. The kind of silence that sinks into your bones. I headed straight to my room. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to pretend everything was fine. But halfway up the stairs, I heard it. Dad's voice. Sharp. Clipped. Directed at Mom. "She needs discipline," he said. "Not sympathy. She's becoming a problem." My hand froze on the railing. My heart thudded once. Hard. Mom's voice followed. Softer, but tired. "She's just struggling. You know that." Dad scoffed. "Struggling? Everyone struggles. We didn't raise her to be a victim." Victim. The word hit me like cold water. I backed down the stairs quietly, not wanting them to know I was listening. But then, another voice joined in. Mia, of course. "She snapped at me today," she said bitterly. "And she's been weird at school. People are talking." People are talking. There it was, the family's greatest fear. Not that I was hurting, not that I was drowning, but that someone might notice. Dad sighed. "I warned you this would happen if she kept shutting everyone out." Mom whispered something I couldn't hear. And then, Dad said the sentence that turned my blood cold. "We may need to teach her a lesson she won't forget." I didn't wait to hear more. I slipped out the front door quietly, my backpack hanging off one shoulder, my breath shaking in my chest. I walked, not with a destination in mind, just far enough that the house became small behind me. The sunset painted the sky in orange and pink, but it didn't feel beautiful. It felt like the world was on fire, and I was the only one burning. At the park, I sat on a cold bench and pulled out the torn pieces from my bag. I tried to tape them together, but nothing lined up the way it used to. Just like me. An elderly woman walking her dog stopped nearby. She watched me for a moment, then smiled gently. "That looks beautiful," she said. I blinked. Beautiful? No one had used that word for anything I did in years. "It's ruined," I whispered. She shook her head. "Ruined things tell better stories." Before I could respond, the dog tugged her along and she walked away. But her words stayed. Ruined things tell better stories. I didn't know it yet, but that single sentence would become the thread that stitched my life back together. Just not yet. Because before things got better, they got so much worse. I left the office that day not with anger, but with clarity. The 13-year-old on the cold porch was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, someone who had survived and learned. Uncle Harold drove home in silence. No words were needed. The past had been confronted, Wrong had been acknowledged. Justice finally served. I closed the door behind me and leaned back. For the first time in years, I felt something that almost felt like peace. Scars remained, yes, but they were no longer chains. They were reminders of resilience, courage, and the power of refusing to let the world define you. I looked out at the city lights, bright, indifferent, and yet somehow comforting. I whispered softly, "The past is gone, but I am still here, stronger than ever." Uncle Harold glanced at me, a small, knowing smile. No words, just understanding. We survived, I thought, and somehow that simple truth felt like everything. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. I didn't need their forgiveness. All I needed was myself, and now I had that. Because while the past was behind me, the future was mine to shape, and I had a feeling it would demand everything I had. Life seemed calmer at first. The house was quiet, the school routine predictable, and yet a shadow lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that the past wasn't finished with me, and deep down, I knew I was right. One evening, a letter arrived, stamped and official, the kind of envelope you don't open lightly. I hesitated. Should I even read it? Curiosity, stronger than caution, won. Inside was a notice, a meeting, a legal discussion about Clause 7, and a final opportunity for my parents to reconcile or lose everything. I stared at the paper, my hands shaking. After years of neglect, after nights alone on the porch, they wanted me involved? Now? I felt anger rise first, then confusion, then a flicker of power. Because for the first time, I realized I wasn't a pawn anymore. I wasn't vulnerable. I wasn't lost. I was a player, and this game was mine to control. Uncle Harold sat beside me, watching quietly. No words, just presence. His hand brushed mine, and I felt steady. This time, I wouldn't walk into the storm blindly. I didn't know what my parents had planned, or how far they would go to manipulate me. But I did know one thing. I was ready for them. And as I folded the letter and looked at the sunset, I couldn't help but wonder, would this finally be the night everything changed, or the night I discovered just how far betrayal could go? The morning felt heavier than usual. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, but it did nothing to warm the cold knot in my stomach. I dressed carefully, each movement deliberate, not to impress, but to feel in control for the first time in years. Uncle Harold walked beside me silently. His calm presence was a shield I had learned to lean on. At the lawyer's office, the air smelled of leather and polished wood. Everything seemed pristine, but beneath the surface, tension pulsed like a hidden storm. And there they were, my parents. Smiles carefully crafted, eyes betraying impatience and fear. I took a deep breath. This wasn't a family reunion. It wasn't about forgiveness. It was about Clause 7. It was about justice. The lawyer began. Clause 7 requires your consent, unusual but legally binding once executed. I listened. Every word etched itself into my memory. This clause, hidden for years, suddenly gave me power over the very people who once tried to control me. Negotiations began. Charm, guilt, threats. I responded with calm, calculated words. Years of pain had sharpened me. They hadn't expected this. Uncle Harold's subtle squeeze of my hand reminded me, justice, not anger, would guide me. Then came the first slip. A small lie revealed, almost laughable, but it exposed a pattern of deceit. And, like dominoes, the rest would follow. I understood something crucial. This wasn't about property. It wasn't about Clause 7. It was about truth. Every betrayal, every abandonment demanded it. And as I looked across the table at my parents, their carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. But how far would it fall? And would I have the strength to see it through? The room felt smaller than it should. Leather chairs, polished wood, and yet the weight of every lie ever told pressed down on us all. My parents smiled politely, but their eyes darted nervously. I could see it. Fear, desperation, shame. The lawyer cleared his throat. Clause 7 will be read aloud in full. Every stipulation is legally binding once acknowledged. I leaned forward, heart steady, mind sharp. Every betrayal, every stolen moment, every abandoned night, all had led to this. Clause 7 was read aloud. Every word struck like a hammer against their carefully crafted facade. Their plans, their manipulations, their lies, all began to crumble before my eyes. And then, the final revelation. The inheritance wasn't tied to compliance. It depended on integrity and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Their faces turned pale. Guilt, desperation, shame, emotions they had never seen in me, now stared back at them. I noticed every micro-expression, trembling lips, sweating hands, the facade finally cracking. For the first time, they were no longer my parents in power. They were vulnerable, human, exposed. I stood tall, not in joy, but in justice. This wasn't revenge. This was truth. A bead of sweat ran down my father's temple. My mother's gaze fell to the floor, ashamed. The room held a silence so heavy it pressed against my chest. And for me, it was freedom. Because while Clause 7 revealed the truth, it also marked the beginning of a new life, and the real journey had only begun. The office door closed behind me. The echo of my parents' whispered apologies lingered, but it was faint, like a dream I wasn't part of anymore. I breathed deeply, feeling the weight of years lift slowly from my shoulders. The terrified 13-year-old on the porch, she was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, unbroken. Uncle Harold drove home in silence. No words were needed. We didn't need to speak to understand that justice had been served and the past had been faced head-on. I closed the door behind me, leaned back, and for the first time, I felt peace. Scars remained, yes, but they were no longer chains. They were reminders of resilience, of courage, of refusing to let the world define me. I looked at the city lights, bright, indifferent, yet somehow comforting. In whisper, the past is gone, but I am still here, stronger than ever. Uncle Harold gave a small, knowing smile. No words, just understanding. We survived. Simple, yet everything. I didn't need their love. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their forgiveness. All I needed was myself. And now I had that. The past had tried to break me, but I was unbroken, and the future was mine to shape.
If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, Comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more untold stories just like Biville's.